Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the massive alien ship floating dead in space. His small salvage vessel Lucky Strike looked like a toy next to the dark metal giant that stretched for nearly 2 miles. He had been tracking this prize for 3 weeks through the Outer Rim territories where nobody asked questions and fewer people cared about salvage rights. The ship looked different from anything he had seen before. Its hull was smooth like black, glass but seemed to shift and move in the light from distant stars. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its sides in patterns that hurt his eyes when he looked too long. Jake had been in the salvage business for 8 years since leaving the military, and he knew valuable when he saw it. This ship would pay his debts and keep him flying for another year at least. Jake suited up in his worn but reliable space gear and grabbed his cutting tools. The Lucky Strike's docking clamps found purchase on what looked like an airlock. His scanner showed atmosphere on the other side, but the readings were strange. The air seemed alive somehow with energy patterns he did not recognize. Jake shrugged and cycled through the airlock anyway. He had been in worse situations and lived to tell about it. The inside of the alien ship was even stranger than the outside. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint heartbeat, and the floor felt soft under his boots like walking on living tissue. Lights came on as he moved forward, but they were not electric lights. They grew from the walls themselves like glowing plants. Jake tried not to think about what kind of technology could make a ship that was part machine and part living thing. He followed what seemed to be the main corridor toward the center of the ship. Bodies lay scattered along the way. They were not human, but they looked peaceful, like they had just gone to sleep. The aliens were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Their clothes were simple, but made from materials that shimmered with their own inner light. Jake felt sad looking at them. Whatever had happened here, it had been quick and probably painless. The corridor opened into a vast chamber at the ship's heart. In the center stood a massive crystal that reached from floor to ceiling. It pulsed with soft blue light, and Jake could feel warmth coming from it even through his suit. Around the crystal were more bodies, but these were different. They wore robes that marked them as important, and their skin had strange markings that glowed faintly even in death. Near the base of the crystal, Jake found what looked like a stasis pod made from the same living metal as the ship. Inside, he could see a small figure curled up like a sleeping child. The pod's surface was clear but covered with symbols that moved and changed as he watched. His scanner showed life signs. Whatever was inside was alive and dreaming. Jake was about to turn away when one of the robed figures moved. She was dying, but her large eyes opened and looked right at him. Her hand reached out and touched his helmet. Suddenly, Jake's mind filled with images and feelings that were not his own. He saw great cities floating in purple skies. He felt the love of a mother for her child. He understood that this small being in the pod was precious beyond measure. The dying alien woman was a queen, and this was her daughter. Pirates had attacked their ship while they traveled to sign a peace treaty. The crew fought bravely but were overcome by weapons that turned their own ship against them. With her last breath, the queen had put her daughter in the stasis pod to keep her safe. Now she was asking Jake to protect the child. She was asking him to take her daughter far from this place of death. Jake wanted to say no. He was not a babysitter. He was not a hero. He was just a man trying to make a living picking through the leftovers of space battles. But the queen's last gift was not just her memories. She gave him a crystal pendant that hung around her neck. The moment it touched his hand, Jake felt something change inside him. He felt the sleeping child's dreams and her innocent trust that someone would come to save her. Against his better judgment, Jake found the pod's controls and began the wake-up sequence. The alien technology was strange, but his military engineering training helped him figure it out. As the pod opened, the child inside stretched and yawned just like a human baby. When she opened her eyes and looked at Jake, she smiled the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. The little alien girl reached out her small hands toward Jake and said something in her musical language. Somehow, through the Queen's pendant, he understood. She was calling him Daddy. She thought he had come to take her home. Jake felt his heart break and mend at the same time as he carefully lifted the child from the pod. She was so small and light in his arms, and she looked at him with complete trust. That was when his ship's alarms started screaming. Jake's scanner showed 3 large ships dropping out of hyperspace nearby. They had the same design as the dead ship, but these were very much alive and full of angry aliens looking for their missing princess. Jake realized he had maybe 5 minutes before they found him, and he would have a lot of explaining to do to people who might not be in a listening mood. Jake ran back through the corridors carrying the alien child who seemed delighted by the adventure. She laughed and pointed at the glowing walls like they were the most wonderful thing in the universe. Jake made it to his airlock just as the first energy beams started hitting the dead ship's hull. He strapped the child into his co-pilot seat and fired up the Lucky Strike's engines. As they pulled away from the alien ship, Jake saw it begin to dissolve. The attacking ships were not trying to board it. They were destroying it completely to erase all evidence of what had happened. Jake pushed his little ship's engines to their limit and jumped to hyperspace just as the alien vessels turned toward him. In the sudden quiet after the jump, the little girl looked at Jake and said the word that would change his life forever. In perfectly clear human speech, she said Daddy and reached out to touch his face with her tiny hand. Jake sat in his pilot chair staring at the hyperspace tunnel flowing past his ship, while the alien child slept in the seat beside him. 3 days had passed since he escaped from the dead royal ship, and he still could not believe what he had done. He was a salvage operator, not a kidnapper. Yet here he was, flying through space with what was probably the most wanted child in the galaxy curled up next to him like she belonged there. The little girl had been calling herself Zara when she tried to tell him her name. She was learning human words with frightening speed and seemed to understand everything Jake said, even when he tried to keep his voice low. When she was awake, she followed him everywhere around his small ship, touching things and asking questions, in her musical language mixed with the few English words she knew. Jake had learned some disturbing things from the data he'd downloaded from the royal ship before it was destroyed. Princess Zara was not just any alien child. She was the heir to something called the Veltar Confederation, which controlled dozens of star systems rich in rare metals and energy sources. Her people were ancient and powerful, but they were also dying out. Zara might be one of the last of the royal bloodline that kept their society together. Even more troubling was what Jake learned about the attack on her ship. It was not random pirates who killed Zara's family. 3 different factions had been hunting for the royal transport. The Veltar military wanted to capture the princess to control the succession. Human corporations wanted her as a bargaining chip to get better trade deals. Worst of all, something called the Devourers wanted to eliminate the royal family completely, for reasons the data did not explain. Jake's little ship, Lucky Strike, was not built for long journeys with passengers. He was running low on supplies, and his air recyclers were working overtime to keep up with 2 people instead of 1. He needed help, but he did not know who to trust. Most of his old contacts in the salvage business would sell him out for a fraction of what Zara was worth. He needed someone with resources who might actually care about doing the right thing. After much thinking, Jake decided to contact his old military friend Lisa Barnes, who was now captain of a research vessel called New Frontier. Lisa had always been the idealistic one in their unit who believed in protecting innocent people. If anyone would help him figure out what to do with Zara, it would be her. Jake sent a coded message to Lisa asking her to meet him at Refuge Point, a hidden asteroid base in neutral space where smugglers and salvage operators went when they needed to lay low. He did not tell her about Zara in the message because he knew military channels were monitored. He just said he had stumbled into something big and needed her scientific expertise. The journey to Refuge Point took 5 more days, during which Jake learned just how unusual his small passenger was. Zara did not eat normal food. Instead, she seemed to feed on energy from the ship's power cells. When she was happy, the lights burned brighter and the engines ran smoother. When she had bad dreams at night, the ship's systems would flicker and spark until Jake woke up to comfort her. Even stranger was how Zara could sense Jake's emotions through some kind of telepathic connection. When he was worried about fuel supplies, she would point to the most efficient hyperspace routes on his navigation computer. When he was sad, thinking about his old military squad, she would climb into his lap and hug him until he felt better. It was like having a tiny alien therapist aboard his ship. Jake also discovered that Zara was incredibly intelligent. She had figured out how to work his communication system and environmental controls just by watching him. She could read the basic symbols on his computer screens and was starting to understand star charts. This was not the mind of a normal child. This was someone who had been educated from birth to one-day rule an interstellar civilization. When they finally reached Refuge Point, Jake was relieved to see Lisa's research ship already waiting for him. The new frontier was 10 times larger than his little salvage vessel and bristled with scientific equipment. Jake carefully carried Zara across the docking tube between ships while she stared wide-eyed at everything around them. Lisa Barnes looked exactly like Jake remembered her. Tall and confident with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. But when she saw the alien child in Jake's arms, her expression changed completely. She knelt down to Zara's level and spoke in the gentle voice she used with frightened animals during their old military missions. Lisa brought them to her ship's medical bay where Dr. Amy Collins was waiting with scanning equipment. The young doctor had blonde hair and kind blue eyes that lit up with curiosity when she saw Zara. She moved slowly and carefully around the alien child, taking readings with instruments that hummed quietly. Zara was fascinated by the medical scanners and kept trying to touch them. The results of Dr. Collins' examination were amazing. Zara's brain showed activity patterns unlike anything in human medical databases. Her nervous system seemed to extend beyond her body through some kind of bioelectric field. Most incredible of all, her cells showed signs of being able to interface directly with both organic and artificial systems. She was like a living bridge between different types of technology. Lisa pulled Jake aside while Dr. Collins continued her tests. She wanted to know exactly how Jake had found Zara and what he planned to do with her. Jake told her the whole story from the salvage run to the dying queen's telepathic plea. Lisa listened without interrupting until he finished. When Jake was done, Lisa was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said that Zara was probably the most scientifically valuable individual they would ever encounter. Her abilities could revolutionize how humans and aliens worked together. But more than that, she was a scared child who had lost everything and chosen Jake as her new family. That made her his responsibility whether he wanted it or not. Jake looked through the medical bay window at Zara, who was now sitting on Dr. Collins' lap learning the names of different medical tools. The little alien girl looked happy and safe for the first time since he found her. She caught sight of Jake watching and waved at him with a huge smile. In that moment, Jake realized Lisa was right. Somehow this strange, wonderful child had become the most important thing in his universe. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by alarms from the New Frontier's bridge. Lisa's sensor operator had detected 3 ships approaching Refuge Point at high speed. The vessels were using Veltar energy signatures, but their approach pattern was hostile. Someone had found them, and Jake knew their quiet time together was about to end. The 3 approaching ships turned out to be a false alarm. They were Veltar vessels, but they were refugees fleeing the same civil war that had killed Zara's family. Lisa Barnes allowed them to dock at Refuge Point for repairs while Jake kept Zara hidden aboard the New Frontier. The refugee aliens were grateful for human help, but they brought disturbing news about the situation in Veltar space. Jake learned that Zara's uncle, Prince Kethvar, was fighting a desperate war against military, commanders who wanted to seize control of the Confederation. The Devourers had appeared from unknown space and were systematically hunting down anyone with royal blood. Entire Veltar colonies had gone silent after Devourer attacks. The refugees spoke of the enemy in whispers, as creatures that consumed, both flesh and metal, leaving nothing behind but empty worlds. For 2 weeks, Jake and Zara stayed aboard the New Frontier while Lisa tried to figure out what to do next. During this time, Jake watched his small alien daughter adapt to life around humans with amazing speed. She learned new English words every day and started picking up the technical language Dr. Collins used in her research. Zara was especially fascinated by the ship's computer systems and would spend hours watching the data streams on various monitors. Jake found himself settling into an unexpected routine of caring for Zara. She woke up early each morning full of energy and questions about everything around her. Jake would take her to the ship's observation deck where she would press her small hands against the viewport and point at different stars while he told her their names. She remembered everything he taught her and would repeat the information back to him in her careful English mixed with melodic Veltar phrases. Dr. Collins made remarkable discoveries about Zara's abilities during their time together. The alien child could interface with human technology in ways that should have been impossible. When she touched computer terminals, the systems would respond to her thoughts as if she was sending direct neural commands. She could make lights brighter or dimmer just by focusing on them. Most amazing of all, she seemed to understand the emotional state of the ship's artificial intelligence and could calm it down when system conflicts arose. Jake began to understand that Zara was not just learning about human technology. She was learning about human emotions and relationships. She watched how Jake interacted with Lisa and Dr. Collins and started copying their social behaviors. She learned to say please and thank you. She learned to share her food with others even though she barely ate physical meals. Most importantly, she learned to trust that Jake would always be there when she needed him. The peaceful weeks came to an end when Commander Rex Stone arrived at Refuge Point with urgent news. Jake's old military buddy looked tired and scared as he explained what he had learned through his private security contacts. The Devourers were not just hunting Veltar royalty. They were tracking any human who had come into contact with Veltar technology. Jake's rescue of Zara had put him on their target list. Rex brought detailed intelligence about the Devourers that made Jake's blood run cold. They were not a normal alien species. They were something else entirely. Ancient and hungry creatures that could absorb the life force from both organic beings and artificial systems. They traveled in ships that looked like giant insects made of black metal, and when they attacked worlds, nothing was left alive. Even worse, Rex had learned that human corporations were working with some Devourer agents. They wanted access to Veltar, biotechnology, and were willing to trade information about royal family members in exchange. Several major companies had put bounties on Zara that would make the finder rich beyond imagination. Jake realized that nowhere in human space would be truly safe for his adopted daughter. The discussion about what to do next was interrupted by alarms throughout Refuge Point. The asteroid base's sensors had detected a massive energy signature, approaching from hyperspace. Whatever was coming was bigger than any ship in their small fleet. Jake felt his heart sink as he realized their hiding place had been discovered. The ship that emerged from hyperspace was a nightmare made real. It looked like an enormous spider built from black crystal and twisted metal. Parts of its hull seemed to move and shift like it was alive. Energy crackled along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Jake had never seen anything like it, but he knew immediately what it was. The Devourers had found them. Jake ran to find Zara, who was in the ship's computer core with Dr. Collins studying data patterns. When he burst into the room, Zara looked up at him with her large, dark eyes, and he could see that she already knew something was wrong. Her empathic abilities had picked up on his fear and panic. Jake scooped her up in his arms and ran for the nearest escape pods, while Lisa Barnes ordered all ships to prepare for immediate departure. The Devourer ship opened fire before they could escape. Its weapons were unlike anything Jake had seen in his military service. Instead of normal energy beams, it fired some kind of living darkness that ate through armor and hull plating like acid. The first shots hit Refuge Point's docking bays, and the metal simply dissolved, leaving gaping holes open to space. Jake reached an escape pod with Zara just as the station's main power grid failed. Emergency lights cast everything in hellish red as he strapped his daughter into the pod's safety harness. Zara was scared, but she was not crying. Instead, she was staring at the pod's control panel with intense concentration. Jake realized she was trying to interface with the escape system to help them get away safely. As their pod launched, Jake saw other ships fleeing from the dying station. Lisa's new frontier was covering their escape with her research vessels. Limited weapons while Rexstone's security ship tried to jam the Devourer's targeting systems. But Jake could see they were fighting a losing battle. The enemy ship was too large and too powerful for their small fleet to handle. That was when Zara did something that saved all their lives. She placed her small hands on the escape pod's control panel and somehow connected with every system on every ship in their fleet. Jake felt a surge of energy flow through the pod as Zara synchronized all their vessels into a single coordinated unit. Their ships began moving together like parts of one larger organism sharing power and sensor data. The combined fleet was able to break free from the Devourer ship and jump to hyperspace, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. The enemy had found them once and would find them again. As he held Zara close in their tiny escape pod, racing through the void, Jake realized that protecting his alien daughter was going to require resources and allies he did not have. Zara looked up at him, with complete trust in her dark eyes and whispered "Daddy" in her musical voice. Jake kissed the top of her head and promised her they would find somewhere safe. He did not know how he was going to keep that promise, but he knew he would die trying. This strange, wonderful child had become his whole world, and he would not let anyone take her away from him. 3 months after escaping the Devourer attack, Jake Morrison sat in a government office on the human colony world of New Haven, holding Zara's small hand while they waited to meet with colonial authority officials. His alien daughter had grown. During their time in hiding and now spoke perfect English mixed with technical terms she had learned from Dr. Collins. She still called him Daddy and still trusted him completely, but Jake could see the weight of responsibility growing in her dark eyes. The meeting had been arranged by Lisa Barnes, who convinced Jake that they needed official protection for Zara. Running from hideout to hideout was no life for a child who needed stability and education. The colonial authority had resources that could keep them safe from both human corporations and alien threats. Admiral Peter Cole seemed like a reasonable man who understood the bigger picture of human and alien relations. Jake had mixed feelings about involving the government in their lives. His military experience had taught him that officials usually had their own agendas that might not match what was best for the people they claimed to protect. But he was tired of living in fear, and Zara deserved better than sleeping in cargo holds and eating emergency rations while they jumped from system to system avoiding bounty hunters. Admiral Cole was a tall, gray-haired man with intelligent brown eyes who had spent his career dealing with first-contact situations. He listened carefully while Jake explained how he had found Zara and what they had learned about her abilities. The Admiral was especially interested in her power to interface with technology and asked detailed questions about how it worked. Jake answered honestly, but he kept watching for signs that Cole saw Zara as a tool rather than a child. The arrangement they worked out seemed fair at first. The colonial authority would provide protection housing and education for Zara, while Jake served as a special consultant on alien technology. They would live in a secure facility with other diplomatic families, and Zara would attend classes with human children her own age. Jake would retain legal custody, but government specialists would help with her unique educational needs. For 6 months, the arrangement worked well. Zara thrived in her new environment, learning about human culture and making friends with other children. She was especially close to a girl named Katie, whose father was a diplomat from Earth. Katie did not seem bothered by Zara's alien appearance, and the two girls spent hours together playing games and sharing stories. Jake was happy to see his daughter acting like a normal child for the first time since he found her. Dr. Collins continued her research into Veltar biology with full government support. She made breakthrough discoveries about how Zara's nervous system worked and developed new theories about the connection between consciousness and technology. Zara enjoyed working with Dr. Collins and often helped by demonstrating her abilities in controlled experiments. Jake was proud to see how smart and helpful his daughter had become. But Jake began to notice troubling changes in how government officials treated Zara. They stopped seeing her as a child refugee and started viewing her as a strategic asset. Military officers would visit to discuss her potential applications in weapons systems. Corporate representatives wanted to study her biotechnology interface abilities. Politicians talked about using her as a bargaining chip in negotiations with surviving Veltar factions. The breaking point came when Jake discovered a classified memo discussing plans to separate him from Zara. Some officials believed that a dangerous salvager with a criminal background was not suitable to raise such an important child. They wanted to place her with a government-approved family while keeping Jake around as a technical consultant. The memo suggested that Zara's emotional attachment to Jake was holding back her development as a diplomatic asset. Jake was furious when he confronted Admiral Cole about the memo. He reminded the Admiral that Zara had chosen him as her father, through a telepathic bond that could not be broken. Taking her away from him would traumatize her and probably damage her abilities in the process. Cole seemed sympathetic, but explained that public pressure was growing to ensure Zara received proper care from qualified guardians. The custody battle that followed became a media sensation. News networks across human space covered the story of the gruff salvage operator fighting to keep his alien adopted daughter. Public opinion was divided between those who saw Jake as an unsuitable guardian and those who admired his dedication to protecting Zara. The legal proceedings dragged on for weeks while Zara waited anxiously to learn whether she would be allowed to stay with the only father she had ever known. Zara herself ended the debate in a way that surprised everyone. During her testimony, she spoke directly to the judge through a translator device Dr. Collins had built for her. In her clear musical voice, she explained that Jake Morrison was her chosen father and that their bond was sacred according to Veltar law. She demonstrated her abilities by interfacing with the courtroom's computer systems and showed how much more stable her powers were when Jake was nearby to calm and focus her. Most importantly, Zara made it clear that she would not cooperate with anyone who tried to separate them. She said that if the court took her away from her daddy, she would shut down all her abilities and refuse to work with any government programs. The judge was impressed by her intelligence and determination. He ruled that Jake would retain full custody while the government continued to provide protection and educational support. The victory in court strengthened Jake and Zara's relationship even more. She had stood up for their family in front of powerful adults and won. Jake was proud of how brave and smart she had been during the difficult legal proceedings. He promised her that no one would ever separate them again, no matter what threats they faced. But their troubles were far from over. Intelligence reports indicated that Devourer scouts had been spotted in several nearby systems. The enemy was still hunting for Zara and getting closer to finding her. Worse yet, some of the human corporations that had been working with the Devourers were now openly calling for Zara to be handed over to them for her own protection. Admiral Cole called Jake into his office with disturbing news. A legitimate Veltar government ship had entered human space, requesting permission to make contact with Princess Zara. The vessel was commanded by her uncle Prince Kethvar, who claimed to be the rightful ruler of what remained of the Confederation. He wanted to meet with his niece and discuss her future role in rebuilding their civilization. Jake felt torn between relief and worry as he prepared to tell Zara that her real family had finally found her. Part of him was happy that she would have a chance to connect with her own people and learn about her heritage. But another part of him was terrified that her uncle would want to take her away to some distant Veltar world where Jake could never see her again. When he told Zara about her uncle's arrival, she was quiet for a long time before asking if this meant she would have to stop being his daughter. Jake knelt down and took her small hands in his larger ones, promising that no matter what happened, she would always be his little girl. But he could see the uncertainty in her dark eyes and knew that their greatest test was still ahead of them. Prince Kethavar arrived at the Colonial Authority headquarters 3 days later aboard a sleek Veltar diplomatic vessel that looked like a living work of art. Jake stood beside Zara in the landing bay, watching as her uncle emerged from his ship, accompanied by a small group of advisors. The prince was tall and elegant like all Veltar, but Jake could see the weight of leadership and loss in his bearing. This was someone who had watched his civilization crumble and was fighting to save what remained. Zara gripped Jake's hand tightly as her uncle approached them. She had not seen another member of her species since the day Jake found her in the stasis pod. Prince Kethavar stopped a few feet away and studied his niece with sad but proud eyes. When he spoke, his voice was musical like hers, but deeper and filled with ancient authority. He greeted Zara in formal Veltar, and she responded hesitantly, in the same language. Jake watched nervously as uncle and niece talked in their alien tongue. He could not understand the words, but he could see Zara relaxing as she connected with someone who shared her heritage. Prince Kethavar knelt down to her level and spoke gently while showing her a small crystal device that projected images of Veltar worlds and cities. Jake realized the prince was showing Zara pictures of her lost home and family. When the prince finally turned to address Jake, his expression was unreadable. Through a translation device, he thanked Jake for protecting Zara and keeping her safe. During the darkest period of Veltar history, he had heard about their bond from the refugee ships and understood that Jake had become more than just a guardian. The prince said that Jake had earned the eternal gratitude of the Veltar people by caring for their lost princess when no one else could. But Jake was still worried about what came next. He asked Prince Kethavar directly if he intended to take Zara back to Veltar space. The prince was quiet for a long moment before explaining the reality of the situation. The Confederation was broken, and most of their worlds were either destroyed or occupied by enemies. The surviving Veltar were scattered across the galaxy trying to rebuild their civilization. It would be years before they had a safe home to offer Zara. More importantly, the prince had learned about Zara's unique abilities and her role as a bridge between species. He believed that her future lay not in ruling a dying empire, but in helping create something new. The galaxy was changing, and the old boundaries between human and alien were breaking down. Zara could help guide that change if she was given the right opportunities and support. Prince Kethavar surprised everyone by formally recognizing Jake's adoption of Zara according to Veltar law. He declared that Jake Morrison was now legally her father in both human and alien legal systems. But he also offered Jake a position as an official ambassador between the surviving Veltar communities and human space. It would mean traveling between worlds and systems, but always with Zara at his side as his partner in diplomatic work. Jake looked down at Zara, who was listening intently to the adult conversation, even though she probably did not understand all the political implications. When she caught his eye, she smiled and squeezed his hand. In that moment, Jake realized that she was ready for whatever came next, as long as they faced it together. He accepted the prince's offer, but insisted that Zara's childhood and education remained his first priority. The months that followed were busy as Jake and Zara prepared for their new role as roving ambassadors. Dr. Collins helped design a specialized ship that could serve as both home and mobile embassy. The vessel combined human and Veltar technology in ways that had never been attempted before. Zara was fascinated by the integration process and helped solve compatibility problems that had stumped the engineering teams. Their new ship was called Harmony, and it was beautiful to behold. The hull was made from living Veltar biometal that could repair itself and adapt to different environments. The interior spaces were designed to feel like a comfortable home with areas for work study and relaxation. Most importantly, the ship's computer systems were designed to work with Zara's interface abilities, allowing her to help pilot and maintain their vessel. Lisa Barnes and Dr. Collins joined their crew as scientific advisors, while Rex Stone provided security expertise. Jake was happy to have his old friends working with them as they began their diplomatic missions. Zara had also grown close to their crew and treated them like extended family members. She especially enjoyed working with Dr. Collins on research projects that combined human and Veltar scientific methods. Their first major assignment was helping establish a joint human and Veltar colony on a world called New Eden. Refugees from both species had been struggling to coexist until Jake and Zara arrived to help mediate their differences. Zara was particularly effective at communicating with the Veltar settlers, who were amazed to meet their lost princess alive and well under human protection. Jake watched with pride as his daughter demonstrated wisdom far beyond her young years. She listened carefully to complaints from both sides and found creative solutions that satisfied everyone involved. When human colonists worried about Veltar biotechnology, she showed them how it could improve their farming and manufacturing. When Veltar refugees felt isolated, she helped them share their culture through art and music that humans could appreciate. The colony project was a huge success, and word of their diplomatic skills spread throughout both human and Veltar communities. Soon they were receiving requests for help from dozens of other worlds trying to integrate different species. Jake and Zara traveled from system to system aboard Harmony, solving problems and building bridges between communities that had never trusted each other before. During their travels, Zara continued to grow and develop her abilities. She learned to speak several alien languages and became expert at reading the emotional undercurrents in diplomatic meetings. Her power to interface with technology evolved to include systems from multiple species, allowing her to serve as a universal translator for both biological and artificial intelligences. Jake also grew during their journey together. The lonely salvage operator who had stumbled into parenthood became a skilled negotiator who understood that the future of the galaxy depended on cooperation between species. He learned to see beyond the surface differences that divided people and focus on the common hopes and dreams that brought them together. 2 years after beginning their diplomatic career, Jake and Zara stood on the observation deck of Harmony, watching the sunrise over New Eden Colony. The settlement had grown into a thriving city where human and Veltar families lived side by side in harmony. Children from both species played together in parks filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. It was a small example of what the galaxy could become if people chose cooperation over conflict. Zara was no longer the frightened child Jake had found in a stasis pod. She had grown into a confident young person who understood her responsibilities, but never forgot the importance of family and friendship. She still called Jake Daddy and still trusted him completely, but now she was his partner in building a better future for everyone. Jake put his arm around his daughter's shoulders as they watched the busy colony below them. Tomorrow they would travel to another world that needed their help. There would always be more problems to solve and more bridges to build between species. But Jake was no longer worried about the future. He had learned that the most important things in life could not be salvaged from the wreckage of the past. They had to be created through love, patience, and the willingness to protect those who depended on you. As Harmony prepared for its next jump to hyperspace, Zara looked up at Jake with her dark eyes shining with happiness. She told him she was ready for whatever adventures waited among the stars as long as they faced them together. Jake smiled and kissed the top of her head, knowing that the little alien girl who had called him Daddy had given him the greatest treasure in the universe. Family among the stars and a purpose worth living for.